Everyone feared to carry the paralyzed alien until one human chose to help. The smoke still clung thick to the cracked ground, swirling like ghosts that refused to settle as the distant sky flickered with the dying pulse of distant explosions. Somewhere beyond the haze, the war droned on, cold, calculated, and pitiless. But here in this small crater littered with shards of shattered machines and twisted metal, something far less heroic unfolded. A woman with ears longer than the usual, human, those pale, delicate appendages twitching ever so slightly, lay still, her body refusing to obey. The battlefield had moved on without her, a casualty not just of the war but of the harsh judgment of her own kind. The Eurasians had no patience for weakness, especially when victory demanded speed and strength. She was a weight, a burden, a liability, as one officer had sneered before disappearing into the smoke like a ghost with no intention of returning. The words echoed in her mind. Liability. She hated that word, especially because it came with a finality that made hope seem like a cruel joke, and yet as she lay there, the cold creeping into her bones, she refused to let the last of her light flicker out. She heard footsteps, uneven but determined, crunching on the debris-strewn earth. A human soldier appeared, unmistakably human even, from a distance. His armor was scratched, his helmet scuffed, but it was his grin, one part stubborn defiance and two parts sheer exhaustion, that caught her off guard. His eyes, sharp despite the dirt and fatigue, scanned the area with a mix of caution and something else. Pity? Curiosity? Neither seemed to fit. "You don't look like you belong to the Abandon the Wounded Club," he muttered, kneeling beside her, with a grunt that sounded suspiciously like it had swallowed a rusty bolt. His voice had a rough warmth, the kind you didn't expect from someone who'd probably seen more death than jokes in his lifetime. "What's your name anyway, if you have one worth saving?" She tried to answer, but the words tangled in her throat. Long ears twitched nervously. The only visible sign of life she could offer, the human soldier sighed, shook his head, and without much ceremony bent down and scooped her up in his arms. She expected the usual complaints, the groans from those who saw her as dead weight, but none came. Instead, the faintest smile tugged at the corners of his mouth. "Well, guess you're stuck with me," he said. "Name's Rafe, and if anyone asks, you're the long-eared disaster. Hey, it's better than liability, right?" His attempted humor was awkward but genuine. She wanted to laugh but found only a dry cough. The absurdity of being nicknamed something so ridiculous in a moment so grim was a strange comfort. As Rafe carried her away from the battlefield's edge, he stumbled over a piece of metal and nearly dropped her, muttering curses in his native tongue. "Stupid gravity," he grumbled. "Always working against me." The pair moved through the wreckage, dodging, broken droids sparking with residual energy and patches of toxic gas that hissed like angry serpents. Rafe's suit interface beeped intermittently, scanning for threats and sending updates to some unseen command center. But here amid the ruins, the war felt momentarily distant, replaced by an awkward dance of survival and reluctant companionship. "So," Rafe said, breaking the silence that had settled like a shroud. "You paralyzed, huh? That must make things tricky. How do you even fight a war like that?" She met his gaze, eyes wide with something like disbelief, or maybe cautious hope. His question wasn't cruel. It was practical, tinged with that strange mix of bluntness and curiosity humans seem to favor. She wanted to tell him about the malfunction that had left her body frozen, about the battlefield ambush that had torn her world apart. But words felt fragile. Rafe chuckled, the sound rough but contagious. "Don't worry, I'm not expecting you to join the front lines anytime soon. Besides, someone's got to make sure I don't trip over my own feet while playing hero." They shared a moment of laughter that cracked the tension wide open, as if the absurdity of their situation was a bridge between two very different lives. The humans' jokes were awkward, but they were also a lifeline in a sea of despair. The sky above was a jagged canvas of stars blinking through the smoke. Somewhere far away, the hum of starships patrolling the sector buzzed like restless insects. The war might rage on, but here in this improbable pocket of silence and stubborn hope, Something new was beginning. A bond forged not by duty or alliance, but by choice. An unspoken promise that neither of them would let the other fall. Rafe adjusted his grip as she shifted slightly in his arms, her ears brushing against his chest plate. "You know," he said, "if anyone asks, I carried a paralyzed alien woman out of a war zone. Sounds like the start of a bad joke, doesn't it?" She didn't answer, but the faint twitch of her ears was all the reply he needed. A bad joke, maybe, but one they'd tell again and again because sometimes the best stories were born in the most unlikely moments, carried gently on the shoulders of a stubborn human who refused to leave anyone behind. The shuttle's interior smelled, faintly, of recycled air and burnt coffee, a scent that Rafe swore was the universe's cruel joke on long-haul travelers. He juggled the controls with one hand while keeping the other steady under the woman's back as she shifted uncomfortably in the cramped seat. She didn't speak much, but her long ears twitched in rhythm with the shuttle's hum, as if absorbing every vibration like an antenna for alien static. Rafe glanced sideways, raising an eyebrow. "You okay? Or are you just trying to figure out how to roast me telepathically through those ears?" A weak smile flickered across her lips, and she tilted her head just enough for the tips of her ears to brush against his arm. "Not yet," she murmured, voice soft but dry enough to remind him that sarcasm was universal, "though I'm considering it." Rafe chuckled, relieved to find something familiar amid the alien silence. He learned early in the war that humor was as essential as any weapon. Sometimes more so, it kept the darkness at bay. "Good. You should know I'm terrible at telepathy anyway. I mostly hear static and old commercials for Star Insurance." She raised one eyebrow, which was an impressive feat given her condition. "Star Insurance? You mean like, protect your ship? From asteroid collisions and space pirates, called Galactic Shield today?" "Exactly. They even have a package for alien-related damages," Rafe said, grinning. "But no plan covers carrying around a long-eared disaster." He gave her a teasing wink. "That's premium material." Her laugh was a delicate sound, surprising Rafe with its warmth. He shifted in his seat to face her more directly, careful not to jostle her. "So what do you remember before the incident?" She hesitated, fingers twitching just slightly against her lap. "The ambush, the explosion trying to cover my squad's retreat, then darkness and the pain of not moving." She paused, then gave a dry sigh. "And apparently being left behind." Rafe's jaw tightened. "Your people, they left you?" She nodded, the movement slow and deliberate. "The Eurasians prioritize survival. If you cannot contribute to the battle, you become a liability. I was, deemed a burden." Her voice was steady, but there was an edge of bitterness. "I was expected to die." "Well, that's messed up," Rafe said flatly, eyes narrowing. "But lucky for you, I'm not exactly the leave no one behind type. More like, drag the helpless, grumpy alien along because I have no better options." Her lips twitched, but she didn't respond immediately. "Why?" she finally asked. "Why risk yourself for me, a stranger no less?" Rafe shrugged, a grin playing at the corners of his mouth. "Guess I'm a sucker for bad jokes and worse company. Plus, someone's got to remind me why I'm fighting this war without turning into a cold-hearted robot." She studied him for a long moment, then said quietly, "You're not like the others." "Probably because I'm human," he said with a laugh. "We're good at screwing up and making it look accidental." The shuttle jolted as it passed through a patch of turbulence, and Rafe caught her instinctively, his hand steadying her head. "Careful," he muttered. "Wouldn't want my long-eared disaster to crack open." Her ears twitched in mock offense. "Disaster? Huh? That's going to be my code name now?" "Already is," Rafe said with a smirk. "You should be honored." Outside, stars streaked by as the shuttle accelerated toward a hidden base on the edge of contested space. The war was far from over, but here within the cramped quarters, something more fragile was taking shape, a bond forged in unlikely circumstance. The silence between them was no longer heavy but filled with unspoken understanding and occasionally bursts of awkward humor. "So, what's your story before all this?" Rafe asked, voice softer now. You know, before you became my long-eared disaster. She hesitated, then began. I was a reconnaissance officer, trained to blend in, observe, report. My people valued efficiency and discretion. I wasn't expected to be a hero, just invisible and effective. Sounds lonely, Rafe said quietly. Sometimes, she admitted, but necessary. Rafe nodded. I get that. I was infantry, blunt and loud. Not much room for subtlety when your specialty is yelling charge and hoping for the best. They shared a laugh. The tension between duty and survival lightened by the shared absurdity of their situations. As the shuttle hummed steadily onward, the fragile thread of companionship grew stronger, a beacon in the vast cold darkness of space. The room hummed softly with the steady pulse of advanced medtech, panels blinking with quiet assurance as Rafe sat beside her, fingers tapping a restless rhythm on the cool alloy surface. She was reclined in the gravity-adjusted chair, her long ears twitching occasionally as the neural interface worked to reconnect pathways that had long been dormant. It was a strange sight. This woman who had been left to die on a battlefield, now surrounded by blinking consoles and machines designed to heal what war had broken. The irony wasn't lost on either of them. Rafe broke the silence with a crooked grin. You know, I never thought I'd spend my days babysitting an alien who's part spaceship, part tree branch. He tapped her ear lightly. Seriously, these things could pick up signals from 3 systems away. Ever think about using that to get better cell reception? She raised an eyebrow, the faintest smirk curling her lips. I might have if I could actually move them properly. Seems your care package has more glitches than the Arajan war droids. He laughed, shaking his head. Fair enough, but hey, we've both got our quirks. His smile softened as he studied her face, still pale but alive in a way that no machine could fully explain. You've come a long way, you know, not just the walking and talking part. She looked away, eyes fixed on the faint constellation of stars visible through the reinforced window. I used to believe strength was about survival alone, about being ruthless and efficient. Her voice dropped to a whisper. Now I think it's about connection, about risking yourself for someone else even when it's not logical. Rafe nodded, his hands folded loosely in his lap. That's the human condition. Illogical, stubborn, but somehow it works. They had come a long way from the battlefield where he'd first lifted her, defying his own orders and the disdain of those around him. Since then, they had navigated a galaxy that seemed determined to keep them apart. Political mistrust, cultural barriers, and the ever-present threat of war. Yet it was in the quiet moments, the shared jokes and awkward silences, that their bond had deepened into something neither expected. The Eurasian Council had been reluctant to accept her back. Some still whispered that she was a liability, a symbol of failure. But Rafe's persistence, his unwillingness to let the past define her, slowly chipped away at their prejudices. He stood at the council chambers, arms crossed, delivering a speech that was part plea, part stubborn challenge. She is not just a survivor, he had said. She's a symbol of what we can be if we choose to carry each other through the darkness. And the council had listened, not because they had a choice, but because they had no other option if they wanted to survive the shifting alliances and threats looming beyond the stars. Now, as the neural interface completed its cycle, she flexed her fingers tentatively, a thrill of victory sparking through her veins. I think I can move again. Rafe grinned, standing to offer his hand. Well then, what are you waiting for? The universe isn't going to save itself. She took his hand, steadying herself, a small laugh escaping her lips. You make a terrible motivational speaker. He shrugged. That's why I'm better at carrying people than giving speeches. Their laughter filled the room. A sound so ordinary yet so powerful in a galaxy where hope was often a fragile ember. Together they stepped toward the future, not just as a warrior and a survivor, but as partners who had redefined what strength meant. Beyond the windows, the stars shimmered with ancient light, bearing witness to a quiet revolution. No longer burden or liability, she was a beacon, proof that even in the cold vastness of space, Connection could carry the weight of worlds. And with Rafe by her side, the stars themselves seemed a little less distant, a little more within reach.